Hello, thank you for joining me today. A bit wet and windy out there today, but yeah, it's okay, it's just water in the earth. So, we're live on Facebook. This will be going up on Instagram later as a replay, and it'll also be going up on YouTube as well. I'm quite nervous about this one today, so today I'm going to talk about what led me on this journey, how I got here, what I kind of went through in order to, what I had to go through, had to experience in order to reach the place I am today. So I'm getting quite vulnerable, a bit nervous, got a bit of fear in me. I want to start by saying, this is not in any way after any sympathy. It's not a poor me post. This is not a look how great I've done. This is not anything, I don't want any praise or anything like that. This is literally a post about what happened in my life that led me here, because what I realised the other day, I've kind of skirted around a lot of this stuff on my videos. I've not really talked about some of the issues that I've had in my life. And I think it's important to talk about them. I think it's important for people to know that I understand. Hopefully it might resonate with someone, it might help someone who may be in a similar situation or in a dark place. Or maybe, you know, that they had similar kind of experiences and feelings that I did. And I've already had a few people reach out around my other videos and say it really resonated with them and could have possibly helped them. And that's fantastic. That's the whole purpose of these videos, is just to try and help people. So by me saying, oh, I'm not going to talk about that now, and it's not about that now, it's kind of, I realised that I was avoiding some quite important topics. So I think it's important for me today to address those. It's important for me to talk about the dark places that I've come from, and how I've been led to the peace that I have today, the changes that I've made. Because it's all good and well me sitting here, oh, lost you a bit in a minute there. It's all good and well me sitting here saying, oh look, I'm peaceful and all this stuff, but it hasn't always been that way. So there'll be some sensitive topics in this post, but that's just how it is. So I'm going to start at the very, I think the most poignant point in my life was in August 2018, where it was right at the pinnacle of my mental health struggles. I was in full flight of addiction, trying to avoid a lot of the feelings that I had on my life, and I tried to take my own life. It brings shivers to me when I talk about that. I meant to do it. I was done. I'd had enough. But it's also important for me to talk about what led me to that, my understanding of what led me to that. So I'm just a normal guy. I was a normal kid. I had a loving family. And this doesn't have to be the same as you. It's just how I was, you know. But for some unknown reason, in my whole life, I lived with this kind of impending fear. From a very young age, I was always fearful of what you thought of me, and also what I thought of myself. I just kind of felt very out of place. And in order to protect myself, I would try to be everything that I thought you thought I should be, if that makes sense. I'd put on a mask. If I thought that I should be this certain kid, then I'd pretend to, or try to pretend to be that. And that was with me throughout all my childhood. into my teens, and all the way up to, fairly recently, to be honest. I never felt enough, and that putting on those masks was exhausting. I kind of lost myself. I didn't know who I was. And it worked to some extent, in that I kind of felt like I was covering up, and so people didn't think so bad of me. But in essence, it just, like I said, it was exhausting, and it just stopped working. And the fear was always there. It's almost like it switched the fear of not being who I thought you wanted me to be, to the fear of getting found out. And when also in my life I looked externally, in the external world, to try to make myself feel better, always. Some of the people that know me on here from my younger days will know that when I drank, for example, I drank to get drunk. That was I didn't go out for a couple of beers. I drank to get, that was kind of like the start of my addiction, and I was either sober or smashed constantly. Well, not constantly, but when we were out, it was either one or the other. There was no in between. I suffered with social anxiety, so that when I did go out, I had to be drunk. Because exactly the same stuff, because I was so fearful about what people thought of me. I couldn't be in that situation, and the alcohol kind of allowed me to relax and forget my troubles, or my perceived troubles. And so a lot of this led into, I had a lot of self-esteem issues growing up, and into my teens and into my 20s, and right up until, again, recently. It led me into, I was always obsessed with how I looked. I was always obsessed with either it be, what I was wearing, or whether I was, the right body image, for example. I always felt I was too fat. I wasn't what I was supposed to be as a man. I heard it referred to the other day as toxic masculinity. In that image that we have as what this is what we are supposed to be as men. We're supposed to be this strong, sturdy man. Doesn't really talk about feelings, and he's just constant. He's okay. He's always okay. Do you know what I mean? So that rock, and that's what I felt like I had to live up to my whole life. And I've talked about this before. I'm paraphrasing a lot of this. There was a lot of other stuff. I'd been in and out of relationships. I always needed to be with someone to make myself feel loved, because I didn't love myself. That's a pattern that I've identified since. I went from relationship to relationship. I couldn't be single because I didn't feel enough. I needed someone else's gratification. I needed that external praise, that external input to make it so that I was okay. Without that, I didn't feel okay. And it got to the point where, I talked about it the other day. I had a daughter. She's 4 now. And at this point, I was already using Class A drugs addictively to try and escape my mind, I suppose. To try and escape the thought patterns, the not feeling enough, the fear. It never really worked. It worked for a while. It kind of wore off. But at that point, it got hold of me, and my mind had latched onto this idea that if I took drugs or drank, all the problems and all my fear would go away. And so that was his go-to. And then I had this little girl come into my life. My life changed. I suddenly stopped being Matt, the city boy, and I was now felt like I had better be Matt, the father. And people were telling me how I should feel around my little girl. And listen, I love her to pieces now, but at the time I really, really struggled to bond with her, probably because I struggled to feel my emotions full stop. I'd numbed them for years. I'd pushed them down because I shouldn't feel this way. And everyone was telling me, you're full of, it's amazing, isn't it, full of love? And I was like, well, yeah, but I didn't feel that. I really struggled around that stuff. And around the same time, we had some deaths in the close family. And my addiction went through the roof. My feelings of inadequacy, of not being enough, of not being able to support the family, of not being able to protect the family, this was just unbearable. And I very, very quickly turned into kind of an everyday user, everyday drinker. And it was really hard. My mental health was at its all-time low. And through all this stuff, my life kind of just fell apart. I had a wife who adored me, and I'm not saying this is right or wrong. This is just how it happened. And my mind had convinced itself that I wasn't enough, and I would never be able to be enough for them, and therefore they would leave me. So I left. The fear was too much of not knowing, and I walked out the door on my little one to somewhere that I felt that I was going to get love, and it's not true. And like I said, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I can't really comprehend in my right mind these days that I would do such a thing. I would abandon my little girl, because we have such a loving relationship. It's amazing. She's literally little me, but that's just how it was. So, and that led me to the time to, like I said, it was the 19th of August 2018, where I had this kind of snap. I was under the influence, and my mental health was at its low. I couldn't do it anymore. I just could not face anything. And that kind of like, there was a selfish decision in me that was like, well, I can't do it. My family and everyone that knows me would be better off without me, and therefore I'm going to go. I'm done. I've had enough. And my little sister actually saved my life that day. Sorry, it's quite, I've never really spoken about this stuff on the, yeah, she came home, she wasn't supposed to come home. She found me having taken an overdose, and saved my life. And I got to hospital, and they sorted me out. And when I woke up the next day, I was told that I basically only survived because of the drugs that I'd taken. So, and that was the lowest point. And that was, listen, I'm not talking about this stuff because, like I said, I want sympathy. This stuff happened for a reason. This stuff happened, and I'm grateful for this stuff. And that must sound nuts, because everything I've talked about up to now sounds awful. But I am so grateful for these situations and what I went through, because without that, I couldn't have woken up to the person I am today. So I landed up in a mental hospital. We call them rehabs, but they are essentially a mental hospital for people who suffer with addiction. I was at rock bottom, lost, broken, whatever you want to call it. And I learned a lot about myself in there, and I was introduced to some 12-step fellowships that started me on my spiritual journey. And part of for those who don't know, from 12-step fellowships, a lot of it's based around having a higher power, the comprehension that we are not the center of the universe, that there is something else out there that has a plan for us, that we can follow rather than the mind, essentially. Because all the stuff that I've talked about leading up to this is all in the mind. I remember just before my rock bottom, I used to take showers constantly because the noise of the water was the only thing that shut my head up. And it drowned out that voice in the head. And that voice in the head was, imagine your worst abuser. Imagine the worst, it was that constant in my own head. And so I started this journey, and I went through the 12 steps. I released a lot of my fears, a lot of my resentments. I was a very, very angry person back then. That was my go-to emotion, because the only one I felt safe feeling was anger. And I released a lot of this stuff, and I started a lot of mindfulness and meditation. And I started learning to trust this higher power that I had this concept of. And the brilliant thing about a 12-step program is you can choose your own higher power. In life, you can choose your own higher power. It doesn't have to be anything religious. It doesn't have to be anything, specific or organised. It can be whatever you want it to be. For me, it's kind of like the universe. You can call it God, you can call it whatever you want. And so I discovered this spiritualism, and for about the first 18 months, I was sober. And I was okay. I was grateful for being sober, but there was just something missing. Just something missing than what the 12 steps had given me. And a situation happened about a year ago that led me to a teacher, and they say, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And it was so true. This teacher, I still had that underlying fear. I still had that underlying anxiety. I was still up and down with life, struggling, sometimes not being able to go to work because of the anxiety. And but having this program that told me that I shouldn't, and I needed more. I needed to go out and I needed to discover more. And I found this teacher, and he taught me what I am trying to pass on to everyone else, what I like to teach people, what I like to help people with. And that's you call it whatever you want, being, presence, focusing on the now, detaching from the chatter of the mind, because we can never really shut that mind up. We're a 3-part being. We have a mind, body and a soul. Different terms, different people using different terms for them, but we still have that mind. And he taught me that I wasn't my mind. He taught me that I didn't have to listen to it. He taught me that sometimes I just laugh at it. And through learning this stuff and practicing this stuff, I sit here today full of peace. My self-esteem before, even in recovery, wouldn't have allowed me to sit here and talk to you about this stuff. For some reason, I could talk to you about it in recovery meetings because I knew the people there were on the same kind of level, and this is a wider world. So yeah, I couldn't today be further away from that night. I couldn't be further away from a drink or a drug. Listen, I don't say everyone has to give up that kind of stuff. It's 21st century? Can't remember. I always get that one confused. But, that was my choice. My choice was complete abstinence. And I don't miss it one bit. I wouldn't give up what I had today for any of that stuff. Never felt so centered. Never felt so happy. And listen, I don't have all the material stuff that I had back then. I don't have the properties and the money and all that, and I've never been happier. My internal condition is no longer pinned to external circumstances. Yeah, things can happen around me. And listen, I went through a divorce last year, and I was so peaceful through the whole thing. It was amazing. What an experience to go through that. And listen, on the surface, I'd compare it sometimes to a lake. It's like, there's a storm on the surface and there's ripples across the surface, but underneath it, it's just calm and peaceful. And the best thing about it as well is that I've noticed the peace that I have kind of ripple out into the lives of the people around me. My mum yesterday said that she spoke to a friend, and it was almost like I was coming out of her mouth and telling her, it just is what it is. Just enjoy the moment, and that's amazing. That's like just the icing on a cake for me to know that I'm influencing other people and or helping other people. Influence is probably the wrong word. So that's all I really wanted to talk to you about today. Get a bit vulnerable. Help people understand where I've come from, what I've been through. And listen, these events don't define me. They don't define who I am. I'm very aware that a lot of this stuff is my own perception. The past doesn't exist anymore. It's the only place it's kept is in my mind. And there's there's a judgment in there and years of conditioning. So very aware of that. But I think it's important for people who understand there's a lot of mental health issues out there. There's a lot of people who are struggling. And I want everyone to know that they're not alone. I want everyone to know that there's hope. I want everyone to know that there is a way out. Asking for help is probably the most courageous thing you could ever do. And it was probably the bravest thing I ever did for myself, and the kindest thing I ever did for myself. And so if anyone's struggling, if anyone's suffering out there with any of this stuff, on any level, it doesn't matter whether it's really bad or just slight, I just want you to know that I'm here. The whole purpose of these videos is to help people with situations like that. The whole purpose of the coaching programs that I'm putting together is to help people like that. To show people that there's light, to show people that there's a way out. So I hope someone got something from this. If you didn't, cool, no worries. But if you did, and you need help, or you just want someone to speak to, drop me a message. If you like this video, please drop a like or a comment or a heart emoji, anything, whether you be on Facebook Live now, whether you're on Instagram on replay, whether you're on YouTube on replay. Drop something in there, help this message get shared out to people so that people can see that it doesn't have to be that way. There's a way out, and I'm here to help whoever needs it. So, happy Wednesday. Hope everyone has a lovely day, and I shall see you soon. And like I said, my door is always open. Thank you.